That's a very good question, and it's very well worded, and it can make it sound very difficult, but there's one basic flaw in what he said there. He said that, and he's talking about, to rephrase the question, he's talking about how, as we've described this arch here, and we've said that all of creation, all that God created is below the arch, including space, time, and history. So a succession of moments, which is what we define time as, is inherently below the arch, and God exists always above the arch, outside of time, maybe not best to say outside of time, but transcendent over time. Doesn't function within time. He stepped into time in the incarnation and in creation, but he's not himself limited by time. So he asked the question, if that's true, then if we drew a line under the arch of chronology, any 2 points on that line for existence before the union, when Jesus came down into flesh and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and after the union, then from God's perspective, wouldn't those events be simultaneous? And I would say the problem with that question is the word simultaneous. You're still trying to say, well, from God's perspective, in His time, those elements happen at the same time. You're still thinking in categories of time. You're thinking in a category of a succession of moments. And we're saying God's so big, so amazing, so incredible, and one of His inherent attributes is eternality, so that He doesn't even think in that mode, that linear progress of time. That's just not even a part of His nature. That's something He's created for us. So we can't say, well, A and B happen simultaneous to God. No, simultaneous is a meaningless term to describe how God experiences reality. It's something that's part of our under the arch understanding. Does that make sense? And I think that's why that question actually wouldn't work at all.
Well, it's a good question. I mean,
you can tackle the question. I just attacked the word.
It works in this sense that it is so hard for us because we do try to understand God, and if He doesn't experience a succession of moments, if He doesn't have a before and after in His essence, if He transcends time in that way, us trying to grab a hold of that and in any sense comprehend it puts us in a tailspin.
Yeah.
It's a necessary thing, even philosophically, without the Bible or anything else. That's what had to happen. God can't be in time. If He's in time, then time lasts forever. And if time lasts forever, then it goes infinitely into the past. If it goes infinitely into the past, we never get to the present because we have an infinite amount of time to go.
Now explain what you mean there, because I'm not sure everyone's heard that before. Are you saying we can't speak of infinity past?
Yeah, there's no such thing as infinity past. There's no such thing as time going back forever, a succession of moments, a succession of events. At some point, there had to be a beginning of time. Because if there wasn't a beginning of time, imagine this. And I used to sit in bed thinking about this. I used to think about eternity, and I'd think, God, how are we going to live forever? And it'd blow my mind about living forever in the future. That was bad enough, right? And I do believe in that. But then I'd think, how in the world could God, you go back 1 trillion years and there's God. Then go back another 1 trillion years and there's God. And then do that in infinite amount of time. Infinite means what? Never ending. A never-ending amount of trillions. And He's still there. But that's absurd. It's not just God is so great He can do that. That's impossible. It's like God creating a square triangle. Impossible. It's like God deciding not to exist. Impossible. Time had to begin. It'd be like this. If we're at the present moment, and I think everybody would agree we're in the present, right? We're not in the past. We're not in the future. We're in the present. We're right now, okay? Well, now we're not. Now it was just a minute ago, but now we will be. We get you. Yeah, that goes on forever. But, so, if we're in the now, which everybody would agree that we are, then it's impossible for us to have traveled an infinite number of succession of events to get to the now, because we'd always have an infinite to go. Here's a good illustration. If a man were to jump out of an infinitely deep hole, think of that. He's jumping out of an infinitely deep hole. When does he get out? Never. The getting out of the hole is the now. You've got to have a starting point, right, in order to get out of the hole. Imagine this. If I came in here and I was counting, and started off the session, and I said, -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0. Shoo! He said, what were you doing, Michael? I said, well, I was counting backwards from negative. He said, how far? I said, I started infinite negative. Forever, infinite ago. And I just now got to 0. 0 is now. 0 is the present. If we're in the now, we're at 0. How long would it take me to get to 0? You would never get there. Why? You would always have an infinite amount to go. Time had to begin. God has to be outside of time. God has to produce time. Time is a creation. God is not slave to time. He's not, trying to figure out what to do because he's bored, because he's just got so much time on his hands. He began time. He exists outside of time. That concept alone will blow your mind, totally. But at the same time, it is a philosophical, rational, logical necessity as well as a biblical one. You want to add to that at all?
Maybe just a quick thought to kind of help you get what we're saying. We're saying God's so much greater than us and has an element of his being, eternality, that we don't have, that we'll never really fully understand. You might picture it like this. We are three-dimensional creatures. We understand height and depth and width, right? But imagine a world, and I forget, there's a philosopher that wrote about this, and I can't think who it was. But he said, imagine a world where all of the creatures were two-dimensional. Like you'd write on a piece of paper, and they've got only height and width, but no depth. If they were to come in to try to figure you out, and to figure out what you look like, your facial features, your body structure, they'd be at a total loss. A two-dimensional figure on a piece of paper that couldn't experience our height might be able to go all around us and go, oh, okay, I have deduced that Tim is a circle. He'd go around Michael and go, I have deduced that Michael is a much bigger circle.
Thank you.
Yeah, fair. But that's all that they could ever get. All they could ever understand was that circumference. They could never begin to comprehend the three dimensions that we live in. And sometimes when we think of God, it's helpful for us to realize he's so far above us and so far outside of us in his above-the-arch existence that we'll never get any better understanding of him than a two-dimensional creature could get of us.